Welcome to Scene, where the art world meets the real world. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with emerging and established artists to offer a genuine glimpse into their lives and minds, all in an authentic and totally straightforward manner. I'm Carrie Scott, your host. And with 2 decades of experience as a curator and art historian, I firmly believe in the transformative power of art, if it's seen. We're at the Hayward Gallery the day after Mickalene Thomas's retrospective opened. Last night, it was like standing room only, wall-to-wall people celebrating this moment because it's all happening. And the show is open now, so it's alive. She's had this touring retrospective. It opened at the Broad in LA. It then went to Philly. It's now here in London. And it feels like the crescendo of 20 years of work. And I don't know what we're going to get because we've got like a live audience who weren't invited to this particular conversation, but I'm excited to just take the temperature for her and see where she's at and how she feels about the giant stage she's finally on. I'm going to start with the most obvious question. How the hell did we get here?
I ask myself that all the time. The pinch me moment. I mean, I would say first hard work, support, great opportunity, relationships with people, tenacity, not quitting.
All the things.
All the things, just keep pushing through when the world tells you that you can't. That's how you get here.
Does it feel like a long time coming?
It feels like I'm still coming. Yeah, it feels like a long time coming in a sense that I haven't shown a lot, but I've been really fortunate to show in the right spaces.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even though not all the doors have opened to me, and that's okay that they don't, not every door should open because it makes you persevere and stronger and, figure out how to go around it and go through another door. One door closes, the other opens, as they say. But I think it's really, important to show in spaces like this. And because I haven't shown a lot, I think it becomes very important for these platforms.
Yeah.
I think there's a perception because I have a good marketing strategy around my work that I show a lot. I think people think they see my work in a lot of spaces. I haven't had that many commercial shows. I haven't shown in that many museums. If you look at my resume, people are always surprised.
Yeah.
I'm not in that many biennials. I'm not that, I'm not in that many important group shows that I should be a part of.
But you're part of the public consciousness.
Exactly. And so I think that has to do with a good marketing strategy and just like social media has changed that from my presence. But also being very selective about what goes on there. And then relationships with different collaborations. I'm not afraid to collaborate with artists and designers and makers and thinkers that are outside of the box. And then use that as a vehicle to sort of push the work and ideas. For instance, like for Martha Stance.
Exactly, I was going to say.
I'm not afraid to work with a very incredibly creative team of women designers that's a niche and not a big brand, but have a following and support system and make great things. For me, it's about working with people who are passionate about what they do, who are good people in the world, who care about sustainability, work with women in a positive way, and they make good things, that it's made well. My work is made well. You know, my work is made damn well. And that's one of the things that I walk away being really proud of, is that I know
the
how
craftsmanship.
the craftsmanship.
Yeah.
You know, so I like working with people who really keep that as a sort of primary focus along with their mission and vision.
But that's something that's so intact with this show. And I think it's why it has built such momentum from LA, then to Philly, and now to here. That there's this groundswell of, and it's going to sound trite, and I'm stealing your words, but there's this groundswell of love in the show that comes from you and around it. And I know, obviously, the title of the show is a reference to bell hooks, but what's your definition of love?
My definition of love is complex. I think that's why I attached myself to the book, because I feel like she gave me a real understanding of the complexities of love, that we kind of like make it just an emotion, right? We think about it, that sort of like little fuzzy feeling that you have for your first love and for falling in love with someone you might marry or your partner and stuff like that. But love is not always a happy place, because I've learned to grow up around love that's sustained around people that you shouldn't be around. So the love that I've learned was a love of pain sometimes, of tolerance, when oftentimes you shouldn't have tolerance with the people, you should let go. And until I read Bell Hooks' All About Love, I started to really understand that we put all of these other parameters of how we should love people when we should let them go. And that there's different types of love. But I think, to answer your question about like what I've learned today about love, is really understanding how to love myself. I think that's important, of really protecting my heart and my emotions in a way, not where it's just like there's a barrier, but where I'm selective and clear about what it is I want and how I give it. Because when I do, then I know it's special. And when you receive it, you know that what you're receiving is genuine. You know, so I think I've learned to just like be really clear about those boundaries of how I love, and even, you know, my tribe of people and friends. Like, I'm a very generous person, but I'll roll that back really quickly. And it's not about it having to be reciprocated. And I think that's the thing too about love. You have to do it, and you have to give it without any expectations. And I think that's the search with like romantic love, with relationships of intimacy versus familial love, right?
Motherly.
Because with familial love, there's this like immediate, we're born with the understanding that it's unconditional. But it doesn't have to be. I think I've learned that my familial family love wasn't always unconditional, and I had to create sort of chosen families, you know, being a queer Black woman in a world. And it wasn't because my family didn't accept me, it's because society sort of boxed me in, and I had to find other support systems to find safety and comfort. But when you think about familial love, it's complex too, but we don't look at it as that. It was like we tolerate things that because it's unconditional.
That we should.
And then with romantic love, we're seeking the unconditional in people. But what I've learned about Bell Hooks in a different chapter of essays, how she breaks down love, is that there should be no expectation. You know, that if you're going to love it as an action of doing, you know,
Not taking.
Not taking.
That's maybe the best definition.
And so that's what I lean into now. And I think within my work and my practice, one of the reasons why the book itself and the title resonate with me is because I started really looking at my own work and thinking, oh, this is what my work is about, even in the relationships with my sitters and my models, whether they're my mothers or ex-partners or friends, that these are women that I'm providing space for, not just for myself, but for my love of being a Black woman, you know, and like really wanting to celebrate that. But also because me loving myself, because in the beginning a lot of the models that I was using and the sitters, they were really acting as stand-ins for myself, you know, a way for me to express certain desire, seduction, and portrayal of images of how I wanted to be seen, or sort of aspects of myself and qualities of myself that I was just trying to understand within the world around me.
You touched on so many things there that made me think about the conversation you had with Jerry Saltz.
Oh yeah, remind me.
And well, in that conversation you were talking about trauma.
Yeah.
And that ultimately you weren't interested in depicting trauma, but that what you were interested in doing was creating space, but also showing Black women at leisure.
Exactly, because I think oftentimes the fortitude for what society wants of Black people and the acceptance is that they want to see us in trauma. I think that's why it's this whole nature to always sort of brutalize the Black body, because I think even society itself is used to that trauma, right? And that's a place where we all can be comfortable, right? And so for me, it's not that I sort of sweep trauma under the carpet, because that's something we have to resolve. I mean, our society is where it is because of trauma, right? Because we haven't really dealt with the trauma of slavery, you know, in America, like on so many different levels. When I'm talking about as an image maker, images are very important. There are enough traumatic images around the Black body that we see that I'm mostly interested in portraying notions of desire and celebratory and joy and all of these other things, because that too is very important for us to navigate and see as possibilities of what we can do and what we have done and contribute in society. I think oftentimes the stories that we want to hold on or tell are those of traumatic experiences, or gestural, or gesture, you know, or, you know, buffooning or something like that. I mean, we're sitting in front of this very large scale landscape interior of Monet's garden and house in Giverny. I started doing landscapes and interiors as a way of sort of removing the figure, but still with the understanding that the figure occupies the space, but not physically, because we still occupy these spaces. We have to move through them, right? But it was my first time when I did this residency in Giverny that I understood the freedom of being able to just be a white male artist and paint lily pads. Right? Here I'm a Black woman from Camden, New Jersey, in Giverny, and I didn't think that that was afforded to me. But I said, why not? I too should be able to just paint a landscape of lily pads and not always have it be a narrative-based work about being Black as an artist. that's the space that is, and so that's that sort of leisure, right? There's a luxury.
You did that.
Yeah, but I did that.
You did that.
Because I started to understand what the luxury of space and life is based on what others are take for granted that they can do, you know, without a notion of thought, right? I never thought until that moment that I could paint a landscape, because I always thought that that wasn't something that was afforded for me to possibly just freely do as an artist. So that's the importance of juxtaposing those images.
Well, and as someone, right, who I have known of your work, I was able to sell a print like early on, right, 2008, 2009 or something. When I say you have done that, I mean it. Like you, 20 years ago, you couldn't have done that. Like you've made this space, and this retrospective is like a, look at the space that you made.
Yeah. I know, I often say that, like, oh, look at the space I made.
Yeah, but do take that in.
I do take it in. I think, I mean, I have a lot of fun making my work, and there's a lot of joy. And I know as an artist, I can't make work out of trauma. I can't make work if I'm not at a good place. And when I do, it's not my best work. And I don't show those works. I have to make work that is about my life, and that when I'm in a good space. There's some artists who can just make work about pain. I'm not interested in making work about pain because I grew up with a lot of pain. You know, I grew up in an environment of a lot of pain, so I know what pain is. You know, I don't need to articulate that in a creative way. And it's not that I avoid that, it's that I've worked through that by making these images, by doing that, like the images behind me. That's how I get through the pain. That's how I articulate it. I'm not interested in working out of that space because I know what it feels like. It's not something that anchors me, but it's something that I've kind of pushed through. It's not something I put on a shelf. It's just that I know how to deal with it. I mean, it's really, being an artist, I think it would be really difficult for me to have the life experiences that I have and have been a lawyer. I think, you know, God willing, that there was a very specific reason why I'm an artist. And when you think about the girl that comes from a place like Camden, that moves at 16 to go to Portland, Oregon, finish school, works at a law firm, decides she's going to study pre-law, and then walks into a museum and see Carrie Mae Weems' work, right? There was an idea I had in my mind that I was going to go into law, but then that shifted the moment I saw Carrie Mae Weems' work.
Which is the most, like, I constantly think about what is the point of art? And if it's just that, if it's just inspiring you to then do this.
Well, that's why I talk about that all the time, because I think people don't really understand the magnitude, the levels of literature, music, dance, culinary arts, poetry, just anything creative. Like, we create everything around us, right? Everything around us is sort of about a form of creativity, whether we understand that notions or not. Sort of these tiles, although they're not like colorful. Someone came up with this idea of creating these sort of separate tiles in this material, but we sort of separate it as something outside of us. But the power of it is really transformative. It's a very spiritual space and that's why I think it's really important for art culturally to really be at the root and center of our lives.
Yeah.
And when it's the first that is dismantled or erased, or sort of the budget around it is not focused as something important, when physical education and all of those things, when we teach kids that, you know, yes, sports are important, but art, I think, is more important, right? Or they need to be something that's parallel, because physical activity is just as crucial as art. But when we sort of remove that from our daily lives, you can be creative or have sort of art as a part of your life without being an artist. And I think it makes you a better person.
Yeah.
Like my daughter is interested in dance, but she doesn't want to be a dancer for the rest of her life. She talks about, you know, political science and all these other things, or being in law, or she will definitely be someone who is not an artist, but I think art will inform her ideas in a beautiful way. You know what I mean?
That's all we can hope, I think, for this whole project that we find ourselves in, right? Is that
Yeah, and so when I
world
find
gets us.
myself in spaces like this, especially in a place that's not my home place, my hope is that, you know, the African diaspora is all of us, right? We're all interwebbed with it. It's a fabric of all our lives, no matter what your ethnicity is. And so there are many people here, even in London, that will relate to this work, and there are going to be many people who don't. And that's okay, but I'm really focused on the people who do, you know,
Yeah.
not the ones who don't. But I know even the ones who don't, they're still going to walk away with something, whether they like it or not,
yeah, by virtue of seeing it.
by virtue of seeing it.
Okay, last question. I asked Hank Willis Thomas
Okay.
whether he had a question for you.
Oh, you did?
I did.
When did you see him?
I saw him a couple weeks ago.
You did? Oh, did you interview him?
I did interview him.
Okay, and you said you knew you were interviewing
Well,
me?
I texted him this morning. And
Oh, okay.
and
I was like,
said-
how is he doing? I love Hank.
I had asked Rashid Johnson if he had a question for Hank, and so I asked Hank if he had a question for you.
Oh, that's cool.
And he borrowed from another artist, Christine Wong Yep. I don't know
Okay.
if you know her work. Mm-hmm. But she did a billboard, and in the billboard it said, "How do you keep your heart open?"
How do I keep my heart open?
How do you do that?
Faith.
In what?
I'm a Buddhist. That's the one gift my mother gave me, was a Buddhist philosophy. And that grounds me. And I believe in the human spirit. I believe in people, and I see people as they are. And so that's the only way I keep my heart the way it is that I have to see people as they are. And I know that faith has gotten me through everything in life. And it's not a religious thing. It's not even a spiritual thing. I just know as a young girl, I don't know what it was. When I look back at my trajectory as a life, I used to say my cousins and my aunt on my father's side still talks about how when I was, she said, "Do you remember when you were little?" We used to always like say, "Why is she talking about that? She doesn't know it." I used to always say, when I grow up, I'm going to move to Europe, and you guys are going to see, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. I had this vision even at 5. I didn't know. I think because I'm a Buddhist, in my Buddhist philosophy, there's a sort of reincarnation of past lives that I believe we sort of live out, right? And so you can tell this 5-year-old girl why she's imagining sort of this world outside of her. My aunt remembers, and she tells me, "You used to say this when you were little." And we used to look at her like, how does she doesn't even know? She's never been to these places. And I would talk about like, you know, on television, I saw Diane Carroll go to this place. You know, I want to go to that place. But I knew there was something out there in the other, and it's faith, you know? I only can look at my life and know that I am who I am because of faith and belief in people, in the world, and in myself, really, that it's faith.
Yeah,
So
good.
you have to, that I talked about, you have to protect your heart, because that's the one thing that grounds me. That's the one thing that out of anything that I go back to, whether it's listening to meditative affirmations about manifestation, about spirituality, about abundance, about joy, about love. You have to find within all of the chaos a place of slowing down and centering. And I think I learned that by, Mark Seeley. He's a critic from here, I think. He's a writer. He writes a lot about jazz. And he talks about, within jazz, the learned and unlearned systems of what we should do, of how that anchors you. And I think that's what faith is. Because, at any moment I can walk out of here and sort of be confronted with something that's challenging, but then I look at my life and go, before we end, I think about, I'm like all over the place with this because I'm trying to be clear about life is so unpredictable. But when you have a vision, and regardless of when people say you can't do something, like I don't have a gallery, right? And I'm doing all of this without having a gallery. But it's my belief and my faith in myself and my work. And I don't carve out and say it's going to happen this way or that way. It's just that I have the faith that it's going to work.
So it's faith in you and it's faith in everybody, your audience.
Yeah, it's that you just have faith that, like, I'm not doing this necessarily because, like, I just did the interview downstairs. Like, to be honest, I'm going to be making the work. Derek and Adams and I, we talk about that all the time, that if you are wanting to be an artist and you want to be an artist just to be famous, then you shouldn't be an artist. Because that's not what it's about. I have a lot of friends that I went to school with who are very talented, who are more talented to me, I can say that, who are not artists today. And it's because they didn't have faith. It's because they didn't believe. When I was at undergrad, I believed in what I was learning and doing there. I believed that I belonged there. I believed that I was doing it for a reason. Even when I went to graduate school, I believed it, even after that. So it doesn't matter what the obstacles or challenges are, I'm going to find a way because I believe it. And that's my heart space.
I hope that everyone who watches this gets what I just got, because I'm going to walk away being like, I believe it. We're good. We're good.
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately, right?
Yeah.
That like.
And so to me, that's what my
Okay.
mother gave me. Like, she died young, but she gave me a gift, even through some of my bad decisions, because I haven't always made good decisions. And when I was separating from my wife at the time, she said to me before she died, she looked at me and she said, be good. Just remember to be kind to both you and her. And so that's what you have to remember. Like, you can make decisions that benefit you, but there should be a win-win, And I think that's what we forget in society, that I don't have to agree with you. You don't have to agree with me. You have your own opinions, but we still should be able to have a conversation.
And we should both be good.
And we should both be good. And kindness goes a long way. And I think that we don't allow the space for that. We don't allow the space for kindness, for grace, for leaning in. for lack of understanding based on people's experiences or their education. We want people to conform. We want to persuade them and push our own ideas and agendas on them. And I think we need to add that just a little openness for forgiveness and kindness.
And faith. Thank you, Mickalene Thomas.
You're welcome.
You're amazing.
Thank you, Carrie.
You're amazing. Thank you. Your team is like, let's go, wrap it up. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scene Podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with us between episodes, follow us on Instagram at WatchSceneArt. I'm Carrie Scott, and I'll see you next time. Get it?